Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. It's a bit chilly outside, so hopefully I could get through this episode. The title is Treasured Moments in the Depths of the Ever-Present Mind. And so I decided to speak about like a kind of hobby of mine is to play with language. And oftentimes I try to find concepts or new words, or often I create new words for new experiences that I feel haven't been kind of given an idea before. You see, we have access to a remarkable objective realm. Now, this objective realm is being subjectively translated. So that translation process of how an object becomes a subject is really your doing. So when a human being gets to know their free will, they're in some sense getting to know their ability to kind of see an object be a different subject, or even to realize that their attention is moving all. The ever-present is really a mystery. And for mysticism, most people feel that mystics are kind of they are living in, like, they see a supernatural world, but their supernatural world is not one where they have avoided the material realm. You see, of course, there's many kinds of people on this earth. Some saw the concept of enlightenment as a lottery ticket out of the suffering of this dimension. Some people saw it as a sort of unchanging moment in the changing conditions of this universe. That means really a human beings suffer because things change. Your physical body changes, your ideological constitution based on your most updated experience, that's changed. And so really there is excuse me. There's a moment of awe before the birth of conception that seems to have always been here. You see, matter, we give it history, but can you give space history? Can we consider space is changing? Now, even though we have this view, science has opened its eyes to this universal sector in numerous ways, but the thing is that we each have our own eyes, and our DNA is the echo of the efforts of our ancestors to, in some sense, be here. And what are we here for now? Sometimes I wonder, it's kind of strange. It's a very strange feeling. Now, there's many difficulties. There's no telling what challenges await people who have not even been born yet. This world, chaos is a citizen, and so is order. But the thing is that we are the human being. We are the witness of the spectrums that we find our life in. And that's where the power of true experiential independence comes. You see, when I consider myself as a personality, it depends on the room, does it not? You see, we were creatures that, when we were in nature, when we had not made the great leap of the mind before the subjective evolution, I say, that you see, that means at some point it was like the intelligence of the creature, physical intelligence of the creature, was suddenly activated. And then it was like after the physical intelligence was activated, shortly after the subjectivity. And it was as if there are treasures that we cannot comprehend. When for example, this wallpaper I chose for you, this wallpaper is drawn by someone named Rudy Parfait, Parfaite, and whoever that person is, incredible job, because you have managed to re-evoke mythological emotions in the modern time. You see, I remember I went to, with my family, this was years ago, we went to Portugal as tourists, and we went to this palace. And we went to this one king's palace, which was kind of next level, because this king, on the walls, first of all, the palace was huge, giant staircases, giant doors. It was as if like they had made the palace for a giant, do you know? but on the walls there were giant figures, and I was like, this king would come home after whatever he would do outside and then walk in the hallways of his kingdom feeling like a giant, seeing giant pictures of giant people, you know. So there's always something fascinating about the size of phenomenology's intensity. You know, right now it's like a child sees an ant and the child laughs. Just an ant, you know, and then the ant, imagine if it was huge. Then we would be like, okay, this ant is out of control, you know? So it's the size, the vastness, the amount, how much of people are in life. I wondered what is cruelty, and I realized it is trying to get the most with while seeing the least, while being aware the least. My grandfather, bless him, um, when I was 10 years old in Iran, my paternal grandfather, I remember I was in Iran and we were visiting for the summer, and I hadn't seen my grandfather that often. I didn't even know. I had only maybe a couple memories of him, and he had suddenly passed away. And I remember the story really. My grandfather, you know, sometimes any communication from someone you care about is a nice thing. And so, anyways, there was this story he had said. It was one of the few stories that I had heard him say, you know. That means I had memories of him saying, you know. Many other stories I had to go ask my older cousins to see like who my grandfather really was. And he said a story that when he was young, when he was in like, you know, primary school or something, he was a grade older. He went to a kid grade, like, you know, a few years younger than him. And in the yard, in front of his friends, he was telling me and my brother and my cousins, pretty much all his grandchildren, my grandfather was telling us. He said that when he was young, he went and he was in the yard and he just slapped just in front of his friends to be cool, to be like a kind of alpha persona. He went and slapped the weak, which is really technically not what the alpha does. The alpha protects the weak. But so he in some sense went and slapped a younger kid for no reason in the face in front of his friends to be cool. And then he said that day when he was walking by a newspaper stand, and for a second he stopped by the newspaper stand, and the owner of the newspaper stand was so angry for some reason, for some messed up reason, and he just came up to my grandfather and slapped him in the face on that day. On the day where he slapped a random kid for no reason, was on that same day when he was walking back home, the newspaper stand guy for no reason slapped him in the face. He was telling his grandkids this story, my grandpa. And this was very crucial. And I realized, you know, there's a blessing to get your karma quickly. You know, there's a blessing of not falling, but then there's a blessing that when you fell quickly, you get the karmic effect. That means if you do something wrong and something quickly happens to you, you know, that's a sense of deviation from your nature. Anytime you know how you are, but you deviate from it, you will notice. You will notice suddenly cracks in the simulation of how reality's meaning is naturally growing. That means on some level, no human being can judge any other human being, because in some sense it would be judging a process of growth, is it not? You know, what are all these motivational videos we find on YouTube? You know, work hard. You know, you see all those athletes in the gym. I mean, that's inspirational. It's good to work hard, but it's not good to work hard in the wrong direction. This is why we have been given minds, because we can observe then act. Most animal species The reason we call them animals is because they can't have a better discretion. Like that squirrel doesn't understand politics to vote. Do you know that squirrel on the branch? But we as human beings do. We have discretion. We have discrimination. You know? There's this very profound sage named, Indian sage named Vivekananda. Vivek means discrimination. And he has this epic quote, which I remember a part of. I'm going to actually look the whole thing up here. Vivekananda. So guys, I'm going to go into a quote tunnel of Vivekananda quotes. A quote tunnel is something I've created as a segment in these shows where I pretty much dive into a bunch of quotes from a person in history or a theme in history. Okay. Sorry guys, this thing was on mute and I was just talking. That happens sometimes. Anyways, totally forgot I was saying the Swami Vivekananda quotes. Let's go into that, I guess. For language is the paint that gives the moment its reasons to exist. Swami Vivekananda says truth can be stated in 1,000 different ways, yet each one can be true. Swami Vivekananda says the will is not free. It is a phenomenon bound by cause and effect. But there is something behind the will which is free. Bam! There we go. Swami Vivekananda just incredible, like Arjuna hit the target, you know. Swami Vivekananda says that man has reached immortality who is disturbed by nothing material. Very true, guys. Because how materiality disturbs you is that you define you attach your eyes to certain objects and how those objects, even the inner subjective imagery of them. That means, like right now, I'm seeing this computer in front of me. If we were if like a bunch of philosophers were sitting at this table that I'm sitting at right now, and we were all looking at my computer, if I said to them, this is my computer, many continental philosophers will argue, no, man, it's not yours. Yours is like the concept of you is abstract. And I'll be like, guys, I'm telling you, it's my computer. I bought it. You know, and they'll be like, no, it's just an object. Do you see? Do you see the fascination of language, that how easily this linguistic simulation can break when direct experience roars its next step? Regardless of how the mouse falls, the lion roars. Swami Vivekananda says, the moment I've realized God sitting in the temple of every human body, the moment I stand in reverence before every human being and see God in him, that moment I am free from bondage. Everything that binds vanishes and I am free. Yeah, that moment when you see God, you're kind of like, you know, God doesn't have problems, really. That means, I feel what Swami Vivekananda means is that the presence within every living being is before its activity, which is defined by its biology and even its direction, how it walks in this world, is as important as the kind of feet you're given, the shoes you walk in. He's kind of saying that there is a sort of presence that doesn't have a personality. So if that presence is within all beings, technically it is all being. You know, it's like, you know, who can tell a disembodied being to move differently, really? Swami Vivekananda says, if faith in ourselves had been more extensively taught and practiced, I am sure a very large portion of the evils and miseries that we have would have vanished. And he's right, guys. When you distrust the moment, you become violent. Just imagine like a person who doesn't know how to swim, they're drowning. Unless you're a lifeguard, if you go help them, there's a chance that both of you will drown. You know, because to maintain yourself above water is like a certain sequence of activities, and also it's a test of stamina. Do you know that means the lifeguard, when you see a lifeguard, that lifeguard has like next level energy and precision, like attention. You know, that means the lifeguards should be like eagles, you know? But anyways, the idea is that the lifeguard has a technique, there's a special way you save a person from drowning, you know? And so when a human being doesn't know what to do, or they can't interpret reality in a way that is in sync with how they are emotionally stable or not, if you're emotionally unstable, like if you can't observe that an emotion, let me tell you guys, emotions happen to you. This is a very important way of stating it. Emotions happen. What does that mean? That means I've had moments where I've been angry. Now, what I've done is I've left the room, but I've had to sit still and silent, and that infuriating, that fire behind my eyes had to go out. So I'm telling you, it was as if like I had to just sit still, be alone with myself, and as the intelligence naturally, just like your body heals itself, the mind naturally processes itself. I'm telling you, everybody is much more smarter than the world can acknowledge yet. You know, we don't even have the languages to acknowledge how advanced we are as beings. You know. Please tell me this isn't on mute. Okay, it's not. It's not. Okay. kind of like, I don't know, life appears as a sequence of activities, a series of activities. Let me tell you like this, it's like a series of activities influenced by a sequence of imagery prior to the action. That means when I have looked at the day before everything I have done, like right now there's a cup in front of me, a cup of iced tea. And so I'm looking at this iced tea and I'm like, I get this thought to pick it up. Now before the thought emerged of pick up the iced tea cup, it was like in that moment there was just space. Do you know there is a simple level of purity of just acknowledging space? That means I understand that it's like for many people it's very easy for them not to be bothered by the space between words in a sentences. But what about the gaps in experiential perception? You know, many mystics, like there was Sri Ramana Maharshi, is one of the most incredible, I consider, experiential teachers that has ever lived on this earth. And he was once asked kind of like, what is this truth? You know, how are we in this illusion? And he's like, you tell me, man, in deep sleep, do you have problems? In a state where there isn't a conscious individuality, is there a problem? No. So human life is a unique condition. It's a unique alignment of the planet. And so regardless of how nature has selected us, you know, regardless of if Darwin is Darwining, life is a process. That is the greatest thing to know about it, really. When you understand it's a process that has known factors and unknown factors, you'll be like, oh wow, every library, every educational system, every professor stands on the same edge of the world as you do. We're all staring like that ship in that flat earth old school kind of view. Back in the day, they saw it as a flat earth, so when a ship went to the edge of the world, it would just fly into air, you know? Can you imagine that? Study space by observing matter, really. You know, a lot of life, you have to create the value. You know, if I don't create the value in my sense of self, I wouldn't even be sitting here giving this talk. Do you know? You fight language until you find the eyes of experience, and then you take a breath of fresh air, and then there's a sort of abidance. You see, I thought a lot of what I wanted in this life was outside of me. But when I realized my mind was being my whole moment, suddenly it was as if like the lottery ticket was in your hand. So imagine there's a lottery ticket in your hand, a winning lottery ticket, but you're still looking for a winning lottery ticket. You know, and it's like after some point the universe is like, look at how much this guy wants. Really, it doesn't get more divine than silence, guys, and stillness. Because really, divinity is a quality of observance, is it not? Any person who has seen a miracle has seen something they have felt. It has been a unique moment where it's as if their neurochemistry found some way of acknowledging the unfamiliar. And you know, I can tell you, Mr. Within is kind of strangely shielding the unknown. Because let me tell you, man is a stubborn creature. For now, at least. Let me tell you why. Because we all have a smaller ecosystem to maintain. You know, if you think of your body as an environment where your consciousness finds itself, it's an environment to maintain. I remember, some blessed part of my childhood was, believe it or not, watching gardeners, you know, water with like a water hose flowers. And there was this gardener who, I can't tell you, he was not watering flowers. He was watering living beings. Do you know, the person, I can't tell you, I don't know how many people do this, but I have kind of looked at dried trees and kind of like just put my hand on it and been like, hang in there. Because really, we are Like imagine every moment you're walking, there's a rug that's just from like your foot's on the rug, and the rug's just rolling out before you walk. Before you take a step, the rug's rolling out. That rug that's rolling out is is really your mind's effort or attempt to be the moment, be the world. That means we think that we are being ourselves first, then seeing the world. But the child psychology is beginning with the mind first being the environment. I feel like the soul is like a tuning fork. And when there is birth, this tuning fork is like really shaking until it finds a stability, you know? And really, there's two modes of seeing reality. You're either looking at this cosmos and seeing it as a room, or you're looking at it and seeing that the seer is the room. This is why in Vedanta, there's in some sense, how can I tell you, in non-duality, you eventually come to this realization that the one, that right now, the what is aware that you are aware is unseen. It's attributeless. It's untouchable. There's a way you're being life right now that no form can define, and that's the wonders of the endurance of solar consciousness in space. And the subtitle, guys, of this talk is a concept where I called it Freedome Subjective Mechanics. And so if you look at the word freedom, you put an E at the end of it, it becomes a free dome. And I see the subjective realm, I've often spoken about it as a sphere. And it's a sphere of space. That means it's like the surface requires the space from the center. Freedome Subjective Mechanics means that we want to comprehend the mechanism of how subjects are becoming the context to the whole world of perception. That means many, if I, like in my outer realms, I tend to be very simple and secular. But in my inner realms, there is a consideration of legend. Like right now, it's like I can't see. Like let's say you were in front of me right now, and I saw you, and you closed your eyes and you were remembering memories. Now I can't see those memories, but just because I can't see it doesn't mean there isn't, and just because man can't prove it doesn't mean it isn't. You got to see that the cultural program needs something to chew on. Needs some subjective code to chew on. You know, so what that means is you can't exist in society, civilization, and culture if you cannot perceive yourself as an individual first. And children that don't perceive themselves as an individual, their minds get. There's this saying in yoga where they say the stronger mind in the room kind of chooses the light of the room. That means imagine there is like your house has one of these lights that you can with a dial control the lighting level, and now imagine there's two people, and the stronger mind, the one who's more, like let's say the light in the room bothers your eyes, you have sensitive eyes, so you would in that instant be the stronger mind, and just because it's more important to you, believe it or not, um, we can't just try to master our outer life. We should attempt to master our inner life. And to master the inner life isn't mastering anything. It's not like getting a spear and like practicing juggling it and doing that kind of monkey technique where you walk on the spear and attack the guy. Like that's some next level martial arts attack. It's like, did this dude just run up his weapon? That would freak you out in a battle, I think. Unless you had heavy, like, medieval knight armor and you were fighting a Shaolin monk, then I guess it wouldn't bother you. You know, it's pretty much this. We either feel we're painting, or we feel we are painted, or we feel we're still painting, or we feel the painter is eternally unknown. Really, you know, philosophers are like, what do you guys want from us anymore? You know, what else can we tell you? It's like it's empty, it's full, or emptiness and full is being observed from an unknown angle. That's it. Like, you know, it's like they asked the person, like, what was the first document in existence titled? And the person said very boldly, untitled. And it's like there was an untitled world, and as we evolved into consciousness, we began naming it. When you look at the process of naming, really, like, really, are you your name? If I ask you right now, are you your name? You know, I mean, yes, on some dimensional view, yes, you are the name that we can only acknowledge you through. You know, like, if you don't have that name, we don't know who you are. But, like, at the same time, the name was given. So the same way names are given, language is given to phenomena. And when you understand that the core of knowledge is the translation of experience into efforts to shake the linguistic simulation, that's when the true scholar's will appears. Let me tell you, I'm going to create a story right now. Imagine all the professions in the world, you know, all the people who were masters in their craft, you know, they all brought something. You know, the artist brought something, the scientist brought something, the philosopher brought something, everybody brought something. But there was one that, let's say, all of them chose that was the ultimate. And it was not the artist, it was not the philosopher, it was not the scientist, it was not the religious mode. It was in some sense the explorer, the will to wonder about what is here. There's what greater force is there for the advancement of civilization, to learn to look at itself. But when you look in the mirror, we tend to just see ourselves. But if you realize, if the mirror was as big as the cosmos, literally the whole cosmos is looking at itself in the mirror. And you know, we are in some sense like 50% nature is moving stuff, and you know, 50% we are. And I'm just giving that number. It's probably nature is always moving, and man is the one who's choosing to interpret stillness in this vast movement. That means if we are defining life as a movement, then death can't exist if the universe continues to move. That means this is why, like, people became writers, guys, because they realized that the product of the mind echoed longer than the product of the body. That means it was like that moment where an inventor was wondering if he should build the greatest invention. And the greatest invention was an invention that till the end of time will endlessly create inventions. And this great inventor thought about, should I create this invention or not? And this inventor suddenly wondered and was like, if I create it, I would never have to invent again. But if I don't create it, I have to spend all this time and energy to create. Because creativity, for a temporary being, you got to be conscious of the energy levels. But if we're considering the creation of the universe from an eternal source, that means instead of absence, we saw fullness first. Instead of seeing the cup empty, you looked at it and you're like, whoa, it's filled with unknown force and intelligence, you know? So when you see the cup full, then empty, you have kind of, you have not been too afraid of your own paradise. So it's kind of like imagining the linguistic simulation, how thought appears to you as a being. to, how can I say it? It's like thought is a sphere around you. You only see it from inside the thought. That means from your experiences. How the world sees the outside of the sphere that you're inside is unknown. And so the being who cannot stand in the presence of the unknown, I feel regardless of what knowledge you accumulate, your hands will suddenly freak out and let go of all of it. And then you will realize that there was an experiential need to study the mind. That you, dear being, are not just a character in a story, and not just a character in the story of history or the advancement of civilization, or the vast projection of a cosmic landscape after a billion years. That means that if the universe was wondering when man became civilized, it's like a millisecond ago or something, nanosecond ago. And so it's very crucial that we look at the opportunity given, literally like a survivor thrown on a rock in the middle of nowhere. We are 8 billion unknown based intelligent. Our intelligence is unknown. And you can bring all the professors of reality to, in some sense, declare the finale of how solid the world is, but I will tell you, the weather changes and so does the truths of the temporal mind. That means it's as if, like, you see, I find it hilarious that when you look at Eastern cultures, they are trying to keep the ancient truth alive, and when you look at Western cultures, they're trying to find a new truth. And so it's as if this conflict of minds has led human beings to be kind of like a tug of war being pulled between discipline and freedom. Anytime you feel that the result of discipline is not rewarding to your archetype or your characteristic, or how you see yourself as a person, then you will suddenly go towards freedom. And if you've been in freedom so long, imagine like a lot of probably like the children of billionaires who are, let's say, who have been denied, like the Buddha, to experience a normal childhood. You know, it's as if a lot of spoiled kids of billionaires will suddenly notice the multidimensionality of the world. This is the cool thing. I feel the middle class has it the worst. The middle class has it the worst. Let me tell you why. The middle class gets to see the lower class and the higher class in society. What does that mean? That means it's being torn. But the higher class doesn't need to exert force, and the lower class is so hopeless that it finds a new, different dimension of quality of life. That means, like, regardless of who you are, the value of your moment is really where your attention goes. It doesn't matter if you're the son of a king or you're the son of a peasant. You know, your vision leads you in this life. You are, you know, the mind is an exploration. The world sometimes feels to me like a story endlessly retold by the new day. Guys, a couple talks ago, I said that I will share the science fiction chapter, a chapter of my science fiction novel, which was, believe it or not, I don't remember the name of it, but I'll associate it as Azadima's chapter, you know. So Azadima, Azadima, I think 2 M's A. Azadima is a character that has not seen. He thinks he's human, but he's actually a star being. And in some sense, I believe his father, oh man, how did I write the story? One of his parents, I don't know if it's the father or the mother, but one of his parents is a scientist, and the other has just gone missing from the childhood. So Azarima he's like this character in this post-apocalyptic realm, and the chapter starts with imagine a broken bridge. So imagine a bridge where just a chunk in the middle is not there, and on the edge of that kind of broken part of the bridge, there's a man sleeping. There's a man sleeping. Literally, if he moves right, he falls down the bridge. But he's sleeping right at the edge. And as he's sleeping right at the edge, you know, Azadima is a character, guys, where you got to know this about him. He has this giant cylindrical capsule that's mysterious, alien technology. He doesn't know what's inside it, but it's this giant cylindrical, not giant, but like, you know, fire hydrant, like maybe like twice bigger than a fire hydrant, you know? And it's this thing, like Azadima could probably sit on it, you know? And so this capsule, whenever enemies approach, this capsule just flies into the air and nobody can find it. It just vanishes, you know? So, but it's this capsule, it's this cylindrical capsule where it's as if in the story you'll figure out that parent that's missing kinda has given him something. You know, he's linked this, it's like his extraterrestrial birthright. Later on he'll realize. Azatima is one of the most, guys, he has one of the most beautiful hearts, like as a being in the story. He goes through a lot of suffering. So this character, one thing is the cylinder, that strange cylinder with a giant R on it, that's following him. Later on in the story, I'll give you a quick sneak peek. In that cylinder, there is the religions of the world that have been just all the religions of the old world that have been kept. So little does Azadima know, he's the bearer of the missing piece of the puzzle in the story. You know, one of the missing pieces in the puzzle in the story. And so he's known just a desolate wasteland. He's a very, like, he has no choice, because all human beings have become half like cyborgs. Like, they're not humans, they're half human. Like, they just appear kind of biologically human, but they're in some sense, like, pretty much he's the only living human being for now in the story, in that parallel dimension of Earth. Now, what happens? What happens is that Azadima, the second thing I got to tell you about him is that in his dreams, there's this bright figure. This bright figure, every time he sleeps, this bright figure appears in his dreams and tells him exactly what will happen and what he should do when he wakes up. And so the chapter begins with Azadima in his dream. Do you know? And in his dream, there's that bright being tells Azadima, this is the last time I'm seeing you in your dream, and when you wake up, you're being taken by cyborgs, but don't worry, you'll get out of it alive. Just trust your moment. The light being says that in his dream, and from the dream pushes Azadima, and when this man suddenly is pushed from his dream state, he suddenly finds himself being carried by cyborgs, you know? And he's thrown into this room, and he's just sitting in this, like, kind of black room, you know? Not black, like there's a bit of light, you know, from the door hinges or something. But he suddenly starts to notice that the walls of this black room he's thrown in are becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. So what that means is the prisoners, the cyborgs, throw him into a prison that would crush him, literally, you know? And so, as Azadima is there, he's just constantly remembering the dream, and he's just sitting there in the moment, and out of nowhere, this giant cylinder, that cylinder thing that would follow him, you know, just breaks through the ceiling and comes right between the walls, so the walls can't, in some sense, kind of close. Azadima gets on top of it, gets onto the higher level, the cylinder frees itself and follows him. And that's that chapter, you know. Of The Messenger of Giants. This is the novel. There is also, I'm still in the design process of this chapter, but it's this chapter where I thought about a piano player, like those classic piano players, like back in the day in Memphis and whatnot, you know, with those old school hats, you know, like, it's like, I imagined a piano player, and this piano player, suddenly he has this kind of being appear to him, and God is through a piano enlightening him, you know? And what this God is it's like, let me tell you, often I notice something, guys. There's two ways of writing science fiction. And our world and most science fiction writers have had access to that one way of it. And what that one way is that when you look, most people, when they think of science fiction, they're thinking about how the surface of the world changes. But there's also science fiction in wondering about how the psychology of a being in that science fiction world would be like. Do you know? And so Rasul, I'm going to say this last thing about the story. The main character, his name is Rasul. His girlfriend is Galactica, this like beautiful blonde girl, but she's blind. She has like this kind of cloth over her eyes, you know. And but she in the story, she sees everything, and she is the head. She is like I say the United Nations in the year 5025 has a galactic sector and has even an interdimensional sector. You know what that means is that means there are aliens in the UN coming and giving speeches like human beings have to treat us better. What the fuck? You know? So, you know, we can totally see that we can look at a pattern that is familiar to us and wonder of how that pattern can become, I guess, fractalized in grander contexts. You see, creativity is really yourself in a world at first. That's how you appear as, you know? And when the world changes, who can feel unchanged? That means sometimes it's like I see my family, you know, I see my friends, you know, I see all that I have loved. But you know what I see at the same time? The beautiful hovering of all subjective structures in space. That we must not forget we are on a rock in space. That's the easiest way to get out of stress. Like, really? You're being depressed in a world so unknown that how can you even know? How can, like Terence McKenna has the saying, he says, nobody knows enough to worry. You know? And that's another way of, you can also say, nobody knows enough to measure their ability. That means some abilities the environment welcomes it. Some abilities the environment is not even allowing it. In 2013, I had these Tibetan Buddhist beads I would wear, and I was pretty much like, I feel one of the most Tibetan Buddhist Persian guys ever. And and I remember I went to chapters that was nearby my house at the time, and I went in, and I remember I went to the kind of Buddhist section. Like, literally there was a book section that was just Buddhist books, Tibetan Buddhist books, and then they were all red. All the books were red, which was kind of like incredible to see actually at a bookshelf. You know, a bookshelf where all the books are one color. You know, even though not all the books were one color, but you know what I mean, like a majority of them were. So I remember the way I picked out books from that bookshelf. You know how it was, guys. It was literally, I was like, all right, I'm going to spend maybe like 10 minutes in this store. So I just went, and by feeling, I just picked up random Tibetan Buddhist books, you know, just by my feeling, you know, randomly. I'm like, all right, the one my hand touches first is the one, you know, and I in some sense, I got these books, and I came home, and in one of them, which was called The Clear Mirror, I got introduced to one of the most fascinating concepts which I've been introduced to in my life, and it's the theme of this talk actually. Treasure revealing but not external treasure. Internal treasure revealing. I can't tell you when I saw that in Tibetan Buddhism they had that level of dexterity to realizing that what is really the treasure is a treasured moment, is it not? That means there's like if Rene Descartes found a treasure, he'd be like, wait a minute, the value of this treasure is in my mind, which my whole ideological system feels like the mind-body dualism. So Rene Descartes, he was a man he was saying that the mind is in its own dimension and the body is in its own dimension, and the body dies and the mind can't. The mind just watches, like the higher dimension watches the dissolution of the lesser dimension. And so there was this princess, I don't know, I think it was one of the Victoria princesses, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. It was some princess at the time. And women back in the day weren't philosophers, but this princess was a philosopher. And she went to challenge Descartes. And she went and told Descartes, hey, Rene. She said to Descartes, and incredible, it was like seeing like lightsabers of philosophers, the different ideological viewpoints kind of challenging one another. And so Rene Descartes saw this mind-body dualism, and this princess came to him, this philosopher princess. And the philosopher princess told Rene that if the mind is in a completely separate dimension, then why does it have anything to do with the body? Do you know? That means the way she was kind of trying to awaken Rene Descartes from how he had in some sense devalued materiality. He had escaped materiality by seeing space first. That can happen. Philosophy for the novice is a game of belief systems, but I feel the one who's kind of walked the forests of philosophy for a while, it's really, the questions fascinate you. Just like comedians, like you see if there were a bunch of comedians at a table, they're looking at like the depth of the joke, right? And if the joke is deep on a bunch of dimensions, they all like laugh and they're like, that was a great joke, and like that. You see it in those roast battles on YouTube. But when you see philosophers, they become proud of other philosophers when the other philosopher challenges the fundamental core of the constitution of their vision. So you see, it's kind of, you can say the school of Athens was a place where friends broke their inner realms to see what was beyond. That's the fascination of philosophy, and I've kind of wondered that the future generations, hopefully I have some plans for the educational system. Let's see if the educational system will listen to one guy in a universe of 1 billion trillion stars. But I've considered that in the future, children should every person, like every human being entering this system, you should get into what I call elemental groups, and this is to find yourself in the School of Athens 2.0. So the School of Athens 2.0, even though I've called that my Patreon-like community, everybody who follows that, I'm pretty much all my endeavors will, like, you're on the ship of where I'm kind of going with my work. But this is the thing I was saying. The School of Athens 2.0 in the future is this idea that there's going to come a global coliseum of where ideas the greatest ideas come into the global stage. Right now, even though we have internet, but it's not an efficient transmission, really. That means, like, how many people in the world you think care about sharing what is the phenomenology behind their eyes? How many? Now, there are many people on YouTube, but in regards to the vastness of the population, pretty much either people are focused on activities that are, how can I tell you, Either the objective realm is moving first or the subjective realm. There are some people on this planet, their attention is on the subjective realms. Right now, I'm not like Elon Musk. That dude is doing something incredible. He's advancing external technology. And then I was sitting here and I'm like, how can we help this fellow? Because I remember I wrote a sentence for Elon Musk. It was like, go further, Elon, you Musk. you know? And so we have to focus on the inner technologies. That means it's not just important to bring advanced technologies or to introduce new output systems, but like what's being input, what's being put in the system is important. So we need also an inner evolution, an inner revolution. That means the idea you have thought you are is just a fragment in space and time. You are the process. You are the living. You are, like if there was let me tell you, I've constantly thought of like how the flag of a united humanity would look like. And you know what it would be, I think? I think the best way is we would draw a human heart and inside it draw the solar system. And the background would be black for the flag. Let me tell you why. Because black is one of the most beautiful colors. Because it encapsulates, it is space's face, the pitch black abyss. So a treasured moment in the depth of the ever-present mind means that your mind is present and it's realizing it is defining the temporality. So it's as if you are returning to the ambiguous, the unknown observance of all objects and subjects that are moving. Stillness and silence are the space for movement and noise. Remember this, guys. Any time in life where there's too much intense movement, try to become still. Any time where there's too much stillness, balance it. It's like the yin-yang symbol pretty much is self-instruction, is it not? Let's continue with the Vivekananda. I think he has a bunch more quotes that perhaps are important. Swami Vivekananda says the Vedanta recognizes no sin, it only recognizes error. And the greatest error, says the Vedanta, is to say that you are weak, that you are a sinner, a miserable creature, and that you have no power and you cannot do this and that. And that's it, guys. The whole point of ideology is not for us to be less than when we entered the ideology. The point of civilization is advancement, or else why try? Swami Vivekananda says, the world is the great gymnasium where we come to make ourselves strong. So that's inspiration for Olympians right there. Swami Vivekananda says the world is the great gymnasium. Oh, I just read that. Our duty is to encourage everyone in his struggle to live up to his own highest ideal, and strive at the same time to make the ideal as near as possible to the truth. Take up one idea. Swami Vivekananda says this. Take up one idea. Make that one idea your life. Think of it. Dream of it. Live on that idea. Let the brain, muscles, nerves, every part of your body be full of that idea, and just leave every other idea alone. This is the way to success. I think he says idea, but the whole point of single-minded, single-pointedness in yoga, guys, is really once you concentrate on one thing, just one moment, whatever. It could be an iced tea cup, it could be the whole moment. Sometimes I sit down and it's like the meditation, the object of meditation for the moment is the objective realm, and I just watch. And there's something about watching that after 10 minutes of pure stillness and silence and preferencelessness, as if you're just like sitting, you're like, all right, today I'm going to be a humble man and just sit on the, on my wooden porch, not even on a chair. Like right now, I'm sitting on a chair right now. Like, you know, it's like sometimes it's okay to experience, uh, like just like a car, right? When you drive a vehicle, you have to be comfortable moving it in different ways. And when the human mind functions, I say that the human being has to pilot it. I'm speaking to you as if you're a pilot of your own free will. Swami Vivekananda says, we are what our thoughts have made us. So take care about what you think. Words are secondary. Thoughts live. They travel far. And that's the end of the quotes for Swami Vivekananda, guys. So anyways, to wrap this up, guys, every moment you can reveal inner treasures, and simply when you, Lao Tzu says sometimes a solution to a moment, it doesn't mean it's a solution to all moments, but sometimes in life, if you are suffering in a certain way, it's kind of like just stop doing whatever you're doing to see what happens, to get another reference of what's happening. Sometimes the person, think of it this way, anytime your health gets pushed into unconsciousness, you have to bring it back into consciousness. That means even though a person can be intoxicated, do you know? You can say a person can be, like, let's say the person drank a lot and the person can't walk properly, even though that's true, even though there's a chemical reason, but I feel that the mind has the ability to make up for the blind spots through subjective description. So what that means is your mind begins to visualize or it's like you begin to set off a signal in your own intelligence to begin expressing. So I am telling you, sometimes in life it's a cool activity to close your eyes and whatever, right now just get to know your desires by wondering how they came to be your desires. You know, what did you see in this life that made you desire the world that way? And once you understand something, you're no longer chained by it. Anything you don't understand fully, you'll feel like you don't know, like, you know? For what is knowledge but the opportunity for open eyes to allow a new advance through? When you treasure every moment, it's kind of like, think about it, even if you found an external treasure, right now, let's say you dug, like, you know, very little, your yard, and you found a treasure in it, okay? And so that treasure, you were looking at that treasure, and for a second you were like, okay, the value of it though, where is the value of it? You see, the value is internally kept. That means the moment your attention is on something else, the treasure is gone, the treasure is forgotten. Do you see? So treasure your attention, study your attention. There's no greater teaching, I believe. You know, the pilot of consciousness means that you're realizing that you are authorized as a creature to exert your inner realms. Like, that's the whole point of it, guys. It's like the person's like, why do I have thoughts? And you know, because those thoughts are really what brings the energy for action. Your mind is like the sky. Your mind is made of the sky. Your body is made of the earth. And that is where we find ourselves, between the known and the unknown. We stand on a known earth to some degree, but in an unknown cosmos. So whatever known language we extrapolate or extract from our experiences of living is still in an unknown landscape. So when you realize the vastness of the unknown, you're the one defining who you are. Do you know what I mean? So I think the most creative thing a person can do is just be aware how their sense of self is a creation of their own choice and vision. For the concept of an ever-present mind, like, it's not something you can even find. It's present already. If the concept is true, there's no search. If the concept is false, then you search. You know, most people try to break illusions, not truths. So anyways, guys, if there's no further questions, as Maria Ushiba says, create each day anew. That's the power of the free will. It is the ambassador of novelty. It is yeah. Oh, nice. So that's that's very nice. Or I see your chat comment. Yeah, sometimes you don't know how many times in life when usually when I fail, I revert down to how I was silly in my youth. That means, it's like the person fails and then gets up and looks at the universe and it's like, how dare you? I think it's a cool time to be alive because we are really like realizing we're not just subjects. And like that's the isn't that the fascinating thing? Like everything that Alan Watts has said, everything Terence McKenna has said, everything all of the Vedic tradition has said. All of it is like, hey, human beings, you're looking at a known self and an unknown self, but you are not looking at a known world and an unknown. You're not looking at an unknown world. It's you can say all language is an attempt to make the unknown known. So do you see? Like this is why I'm saying eventually it's like like Dave Chappelle, this comedian, in one of his sets, he was talking about Kramer, another comedian who had a rough night, and there was some sort of verbal discrimination from the comedian, it seems. And so Dave Chappelle was like, on some level, like I was just saying, like he's having a bad set. So Dave Chappelle saw as a black person, regardless of what Kramer said, had access to a way of seeing the moment that it's just the comedian failing. And sometimes many archetypes that most people hold really heavy, at the end of it you go see it's just a person. That means, for example, I was thinking about Donald Trump as a person. Like I'm not, this isn't a political talk, guys. I'm just saying, like, I was thinking about like him as a human being, and I thought of, what if like in front of the camera he's strong, but when he suddenly there's a moment off camera where he goes and looks at himself in the mirror and maybe breaks down as a human being. Because I'm telling you, I don't know how much right now, because so many people are not aware of the language threshold. They are not separate from language. They get hit by language. Do you know how many times in this life, especially in my youth, in the many schools that I changed, I can tell you this. Do you know how many times the moment has come to me out of nowhere and diminished me? Do you know? It's like, imagine you're sitting and something out of nowhere happens. I had a very strange experience. It was like too synchronistic to get angry at. You know? I was running, you know. This was like from a football court, and this person, like in Iran, the school I attended for like 3 years was Tehran International School, normally like English IB based, Swiss based kind of school, and I don't know. That moment where I was running, I became like some person, some kid a couple years older. He chose me as a target, and he shot the soccer ball with a curved angle, and it hit me in the head. And I saw the shot before it hit me right in the head as I was running. So like, if it wasn't me, I'd be like, damn, that's an impressive shot, you know. But it was me, and the ball hit me, and I just fell for a second, you know. And it was, how can I tell you? Sometimes the moment just happens, and all you do is like you're watching it, and then the moment that the you endure the hardship, then everything's easy, is it not? The moment you see the chaos and you like walk through the chaos a bit, then you're like, all right, you know, it's like you get the strength of order. That means order's greatest teacher is chaos. Chaos's greatest teacher is order. The kid apologized though then. It's phenomenal, you know. The moment can be present so simply, and it can also be evoked with various complexity. You can look at a tree at a yard as just as a tree, and you can look at it as a complex set of atoms. Or if you're a shaman, you see it as the hair of Gaia. Importance is a very crucial thing. Like, I think one of the best things a human being can do is sit down, like get a piece of paper and a pen or something, and just ask themselves really what is important for me. That means I remember, like it was, I think maybe the second time I had a dream where I died in a dream. And when I died in the dream, I woke up and I'm like, whoa, whoa, what is this? That it can suddenly all go away. So what is important now? And I realized what most people feel is important, like you look at it in just all movies, it's like the person's family, it's like the who the person is with, who the person cares for. But it has now come to a time where it has to be a collective archetype. We have to care for the whole thing. We can't just care for a part of it anymore. Because the mind has reached an awareness that it is being the whole moment. Let me tell you, I can tell you that I've uh, the concept of the language threshold, Aurora. I'll tell you this, McKenna. There are some things you see Terence McKenna speak about, and you will notice that he can't say anything. Like, let me tell you, language is a room. There's this poet. He says the words you speak become the house you live in. For him, life was not a he didn't perceive language ultimately as a technology because he saw it as a living thing. He was a shaman. Terence McKenna, regardless of how much people see him as a secular individual, I see him as a shaman. His eyes opened up to the shamanic dimension. What that means is he saw the mover. He saw the prime mover in his own eyes. When you see the prime mover in your own eyes, then you begin to see that there's a responsibility of your own. How can I tell you? I remember giving a talk. I think it was the talk before this. Is like, could matter be a language for higher dimensions? I feel Terence McKenna would see it as that way, you know. But there's some things that I can tell you. when I saw it, that we are acknowledging external technologies, but we're not like. Let me tell you, I'm looking at the inner realms as a designer. That's the thing. You know, I would say that Terence McKenna, like, you don't know how much respect I have for him. You know, he's an incredible orator, but you have to realize he knew what role he had to play in history. You know, he had to defend uh, the symbiosis of human life and nature. That means for him, a mushroom trip wasn't, guys, just neurons changing. For him, he was speaking to the mushroom. I don't know how many people know this about Terence. You know, Terence McKenna. What does that mean? That means life, it gets boring after you've just categorized it and just sat in one category. Eventually, its dynamic dimensions come. Now, Terence McKenna, he saw the shaman as the most valuable archetype, I believe. You know, for me, it's a pilot that is designing the route. I'm speaking to pilots. Terence was speaking to shamans. And he had to, because I'll tell you the story that I didn't hear this from Terence McKenna. I saw it in a documentary about ayahuasca, though. And in that documentary, it was showing this son of actual shaman, like one of those plant whispers, nature whispers. And so they asked the shaman, and they're like, how do you know which plant and what amount to give? And he said that his father was this very educated and very incredible shaman, but the father died when his son was at the age of 3. And the father told his son that the plants will tell you, nature will tell you what to do. And the father left the dimension, you know? And so that kid who became this next level shaman, guiding so many human beings, in pretty much introducing them to a neurochemical portal, you know, to the abstract, the sensory abstract. Because for me, listen, every food you eat is altering your consciousness, technically. You know? When I ate lettuce the other day, I had lettuce consciousness. So what I'm saying is, it's everything. Your whole moment is like already a hallucination. Now we're trying to wonder the hallucination of what. Now I think psychedelics, or you can say plants out there, there was, like, you don't know how many people in nature, like how many human beings have ate plants. And some of these plants definitely had a different influence on them, right? You know, it's kind of strange, but a lot of our relationship with nature is trying to eat it first. Isn't that strange? Guess we're still animals. The mind has an ability, guys, to speak its own geometrical language. That means you don't know. Like, I've had some moments where I can say I have danced in my inner realms as just endless, like, random movement of geometry. I have literally experienced my behind my eyes as like a geometrical landscape, and this may sound odd to people. You know, there's a simplicity that you look at a robot, and the robot is, you know, identifying with a certain hardware and form. But when you see a consciousness just identifying purely with geometry, as just being, its whole being is just geometry, that's when suddenly the divine strings and chords of the cosmos are heard. When you find a moment that there is no perfection in perfection, how could there be? It's just the moment. And that's the thing, you know. Stillness reminds you of the potential of movement. Silence reminds you of the potential of noise. This is why you can't speak easily if you're not comfortable with the silence. That means imagine a person who he is unbothered by silence. Silence is beautiful to that being, you know? And so is, like, for example, noise, but it's like a relationship of intelligence, you know? And let me tell you, I think when what is synesthesia, Jake? Okay, I just looked it up. Let me tell you, yeah, it's the ultimate synesthesia, because I think it's a point where the more the person is no longer experiencing themselves as a dualistic bound personality, the less you are compartmentalized. That means the more you're kind of like the space of matter, the less you are the subjective classifications of matter, you know? So I feel it's kind of like space observing. It's like there's the world happening, and the world is not just happening outside of us, it is also happening inside of us. Okay? But when we go inside, there is no outside. When we go outside, there is an unknown inside forever. I feel, guys, we should forget these things. A society will not advance if we constantly depend on external chess moves first. So what I mean by this is, like, I see that we cannot define the free will's unknown ability in a moment. So for me, when I see this, I don't see like, oh, do this and get there, get to that heaven, and do that and get to that kind of heaven, and meditate and you'll get to that kind of that other heaven. It's not about running to paradise through the quickest method nearby. I think it's about, in some sense, recognizing that the free will is the attention. Right now, you are your attention, and you can direct your attention just like you move around your body. And Mr. Within is saying, once you realize you're not language, you can also direct your inner realms, but you wouldn't need to, because the inner realms move on their own. And when I say the inner realms move on their own, sit still with a piece of paper and try to write every thought that comes, just for your own curiosity. You're like, okay, let me record what my mind does when I don't do anything. And then you'll be fascinated how much the mind is still in motion. So it's as if, like, even though the person sleeps and wake up, the momentum of yesterday is still felt. You know? That means when Superman flew off from the ground, and the earth kind of like, he destroyed the sidewalk, but it was cool at least. And Superman flew into the air. People would be like, Superman, instead of doing that, just hover like a feet above the ground and then burst. Or, and it's as if Superman suddenly, you know, realizing, like, a fragment from that, I don't know, first sidewalk he destroyed is now on his shoe. Like, as if yesterday leaves some remnant. There is some torch passed down from yesterday to today. You know. You know, there's guys. I'll tell you something about a very fascinating human being. His name is Daniel Talbot, and he's this savant guy who, like, in a week he learned the hardest language, Icelandic, and he memorized like 10,000 digits of pi, like after the point, you know, like 3.14, you know. So 8 people sitting in a room, this guy closing his eyes and accurately, like a machine, like a computer, just saying exactly the sequence. And they asked him, like, I don't know, they actually, it was in his book. I bought his book. He has a book called Numbers, I think. And when I read in the book, what was his inner experience of the whole remembering 10,000 digits of pi like, and he explained it. And you know what he said? It could have been endless, because this is his explanation. He said behind his eyes, he was walking in a world. And when he would suddenly see a tall object in that world, that would be the number 9, for example. When he would see a short object, that would be like some other number. So he was literally, this synesthesia maxed out to such a degree where it's as if the world of his inner realm is being the outer realm. So his memories was a world he was walking in. Do you see? Like, that's how he remembered it. And of course there's explanations that the brain is wired differently, but your attention at least is choosing what is wired to what. Your free will. You can choose today to be an astrophysicist. You know, and you may not be, but you can endlessly, till as long as you're alive, endure and go walk, take steps towards that direction. And regardless of the barriers, because you just accept this endless endurance, then you suddenly realize energy is not the reason why you're doing it. So when you get tired, you stop. There's something more. There's something deeper in the vision of the presence of your world that you're seeing, that you're like, okay, you know, I can't sleep yet. So I'm telling you, it's every human being, your DNA gives you access. It's like your unique instrument. Every person's DNA is like a rare instrument, and now this rare instrument is in the hands of your free will and however you see your sense of self. And so, based on your study, nobody has your eyes, so you're the only researcher of them. Nobody has your eyes. When you can become content with this, also you realize others don't have your eyes. You know? So Dylan, so guys, Dylan in the chat section says, that's so true. My DNA is unlocking. I was shot into my body as a microcell and was repairing myself. You know, cellular consciousness is evolutionary theory, technically. You know, so there's, you know, unlocking DNA is like, isn't that something happening to the DNA? So technically something unlocking? I think when Charles Darwin, you know, when he came up with evolution, I think after when it got published and it was well known, he was like, whoa, you know, I hope people don't realize that a temporary creature's endless effort to continue is another way of saying it's an eternal urge. We are temporary beings, but we seek eternity. That is why we use words. And to use the language, it's like, think of it this way. I don't see any person's intelligence comparable. You know why? Because it's like everybody's using a different tool. You can't, it's like if we have to judge different people, we have to judge also the tools they have in their hand. You know, so it's impossible. So on some level, life is so like a process that, you know, you look at your neighbor and you're like, that man is always a stranger. You know? There's I have, you know, this neighbor, actually used to, and this neighbor would wave and we would nave. I would wave back, but I didn't have, you know, I don't know, for some reason I didn't go and talk to them. So It was just this like waving, strange strangers waving familiarity, but nothing more. It's probably because of I don't know, guys. Sometimes in these talks I may appear very open to running towards things, but in some dimensions of my life, I'm also kind of like exhausted. Yeah, guys, it's I don't know. I feel we all have this unique instrument, right? And we tend to just like smash each other's inner realms because animals like are used to savage intensity. Like if you check it out, you know why they call it the concrete jungle? Because not people are acting like animals and biting each other and clawing each other, because our psychologies are in the linguistic simulation we're still animals. This is why Buddha's compassion was like, whoa, this dude is doing something that like the species isn't conditioned to do. I want to share with you a story. Actually, let me see which story to share. Here, I'll share this story and in this story, I think it'll be a good kind of other story explanation of the ever-present mind. This story would be a good example of like a treasuring an inner treasure revealing incident. So this story I'm going to tell you. There is this kid. Back in the day, he decides to be a monk, and he's like, all right, let's do this. Let's see what the monk life is. And he goes into this monk school, and the junior monks that are ascribed to senior monks before you can become a monk, you got to take these vows. That means you are doing these kind of like eternal promises to yourself, And so as the monks take their vows, some of their vows are like renunciation. It's like they're kind of like staying even away from lust, because of their inner purity attempt. And so this junior monk is ascribed to a senior monk, and they're walking. And it's back in the day. Back in the day, guys, being a monk was actually like a variety of the different paths you could take, Like a lot of people have attempted to be monks, but I think a few people have understood it the way this senior monk in this story has understood it. So this junior monk is ascribed to the senior monk, and the junior monk is trying to do everything like exactly like how monk school wants him. He's trying to be the perfect A student in monk school. He's trying to embody the teacher's personality, And so the senior monk is walking with the junior monk, and some of the first things he says is like, walk gently. Monks are not rushing. And so as they're walking gently, suddenly the junior monk sees like this very attractive girl, this very attractive woman, and she needs to get across this like stream, like puddle situation that you can't literally, like it's hard for her to cross without like damaging her clothing, So in that instant, the senior monk suddenly walks away from the junior monk, goes up to the lady, and asks her what's going on, and she tells her that she needs to cross the stream, and he kind of like a transformer, She carries the lady across the stream, and the junior monk is like, oh my god, what did I just see? What? The junior monk, there's inner explosions happening, So he's like he can't. He's like, it's like the senior that he's looking up to is not listening to the vow he's taken, So what happens is the senior monk assists the beautiful girl, and then he comes back, and she thanks him, and he comes back, and they're walking, you know. Yeah, guys, but I'm gonna open up the story to the context of the talk, so check it out. Pretty much, the kid's what the fuck? Like, I came to monk school, and the senior monk just, we renounced touching women, and now, like, what is this? He just, this guy's doing whatever he wants. And so for 20 minutes, this kid is nervous, like the gentle walking is forgotten. He's kind of like in his mind, he's kind of like, oh my God, the junior monk, he's at that level of maturity, Like, check this out. So look at what happens. After 20 minutes, this kid is like burning inside. He's like, I gotta say something. And very politely, he says, sir, how could you touch that woman? You broke the vow. You broke the vow, man. And in that moment, the senior monk says, look at how the senior monk responds. Says something so incredible. He says, I picked her up in that moment, and I carried her, and I put her there. You are still carrying her in your mind. Guys, just think about what this implies. Do you know? It implies that the kid suddenly realizes, oh my God, I am carrying events on that finished in my mind. So you see, you go and look at, guys, it's kind of very, even though there in many religious traditions, there has been kind of like a sort of religious purity and piety and all this, but I'm telling you, all the prophet, most prophets had kids, but the whole point of it was this mindfulness, like, like even, like the lineage of Buddhism has continued because of reproduction, And so what it means is it's just the mindfulness. Do you see what I'm saying? That means when you're in the moment, be in love. And then when you're out of the moment, you have gone to your next moment. So it's a sort of not letting moments from the past linger in the attention, where if they linger after a while, they become chronic emotions. They become heavy emotions. Because really, you got to observe your life. Yeah, guys, I'm just sharing a Zen story, pretty much, I read online, but I'm just telling you, like, that's like the inner treasure. When that kid realized that the suffering image behind his eyes doesn't need to linger, and believe it or not, as we live on, it just changes. Like, I've had problems in the past that before I solved the problem, I became someone else. Literally, I grew out of the self-conceived limitation. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I'm pretty much done with the talk. I don't know, unless somebody has something they want to say in the chat section. You got to learn to treat your own mind as a master of every experience it has journeyed through so far. Trusting your intelligence is really, that's what's missing from our civilization being advanced. People are not trusting how they are naturally because they're conditioned in systems that devalue them. So how hilarious is this? New eyes are opening, new eyes are opening. And all these children are being told stories. We're spoon-feeding children cultural programs, stories. And when we find a way that the character can live again in the story or move indifferently in the story, we get inspired. So every time you can see something new, you are your own inspiration, technically. Yeah. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in, and have a great day. Namaste.